Will the House please come to order and members kindly take their seats? Good morning. In lieu of a devotional today, will you please join me in a moment of silence? Will members please rise as Paige Elliott Oldstad of Lincoln leads us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
Members, we have 4 House bills for introduction today. The first is House Bill 497, which is an act relating to student freedom of expression rights in school-sponsored media in approved independent schools and post-secondary schools, introduced by Representative Casey of Montpelier. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 497, an act relating to student freedom of expression rights in school-sponsored media in approved independent schools and post-secondary schools.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Education. The next is House Bill 498, which is an act relating to prohibiting municipal regulation of homelessness and supporting municipal programs to address homelessness, introduced by Representative Hedrick of Burlington. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 498, an act relating to prohibiting municipal regulation of homelessness and supporting municipal programs to address homelessness.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. Next is House Bill 499, which is an act relating to establishing the task force to study and develop reparation proposals for the institution of chattel slavery, introduced by Representative Hedrick of Burlington. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 499, an act relating to establishing the task force to study and develop reparation proposals for the institution of chattel slavery.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on General and Housing. Finally, House Bill 500 is an act relating to automated license plate recognition systems, introduced by Representative Rachelson of Burlington. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
H 500, an act relating to automated license plate recognition systems.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Transportation. We also have 3 Senate bills for referral today. The first is Senate Bill 46, which is an act relating to the taxation of vehicles used for forestry operations, introduced by Senator White and others. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S 46, an act relating to the taxation of vehicles used for forestry operations.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. Next is Senate Bill 71, an act relating to consumer data privacy and online surveillance, introduced by Senator Clarkson and others. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S 71, an act relating to consumer data privacy and online surveillance.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Commerce and Economic Development. And finally, Senate Bill 126 is an act relating to healthcare payment and delivery system reform, introduced by the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare. Please listen to the first reading of the bill.
S 126, an act relating to healthcare payment and delivery system reform.
Now, the bill has been read the first time and is referred to the Committee on Healthcare. Members, we have a bill on the notice calendar requiring referral to a money committee pursuant to House Rule 35A. House Bill 454 is an act relating to transforming Vermont's education governance, quality, and finance systems, affecting the revenue of the state. The bill is referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. Members, we have received a request to read a House concurrent resolution that the House and Senate adopted pursuant to the consent calendar. HCR 59 is a House concurrent resolution honoring Linda C. Johnson for her outstanding state and national contributions to the prevention of child abuse. Please listen to the reading of the resolution.
Whereas during her extraordinary 38-year tenure as the Executive Director of Prevent Child Abuse Vermont, PCAVT, Linda Johnson devoted considerable energy to developing innovative approaches to combating child abuse. And whereas Linda Johnson provided invaluable leadership and guidance to PCAVT's work that promotes and supports healthy relationships within families, schools, and communities to eliminate child abuse. And whereas her pioneering initiatives have garnered praise both in Vermont and nationally, where she is a recognized leader in the effort to prevent child abuse, particularly child sexual abuse. And whereas Linda Johnson developed a deep understanding of the complex issues facing children and their families that might lead to child abuse, and she approached this daunting task compassionately. And whereas as PCAVT Executive Director, she structured the organization into 3 departments: the Family Support Programs, the Healthy Relationships Project, and the Safe Environments for Infants and Toddlers Services. And the PCAVT collaborates with numerous public and nonprofit organizations. And whereas Linda Johnson directed and actively engaged in PCAVT's effective advocacy campaign that led to state funding for 80 parent support groups impacting over 1,900 children, and enabling programs to be conducted in each of the 5 men's prisons in Vermont. And whereas she spearheaded projects that contributed to a 66% reduction in the number of child abuse victims and a significant decrease in the prevalence of shaken baby syndrome. And whereas in December 2024, as she concluded her nearly 4 decades serving as the PCAVT Executive Director, Linda Johnson was honored as the first recipient of the organization's Lifetime Champion for Children Award. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that the General Assembly honors Linda C. Johnson for her outstanding state and national contributions to the prevention of child abuse. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of State be directed to send a copy of this resolution to Linda Johnson and PCAVT.
Are there any announcements? Member from Colchester.
Madam Speaker, today I have 2 very special guests with me who are in the gallery. I'm pleased that my mother, Judy Bishop, and her partner, Nick Sargent, are with us today. Nick has a connection with Vermont that goes back nearly 40 years, yet this is his first time under the Golden Dome. It's also my mother's first visit to the State House as well. And while it may not be designated as such, I figured any day is a good day to bring your mother to work day. I was very fortunate when I was growing up that my mother brought me to work several times, many times over the years. She worked in news media in the New York and New Jersey area. And through that work, I saw and learned that that passion spurred my interest in being better connected with my community, with my state, with my nation, and with really the entire world, to open my eyes, to listen, and to learn. And so whether it was through her work, her passion for being engaged, or simply the example she set, I know that it has made me a more thoughtful and engaged individual. So early on in our session, there was a devotional that I know implored us to recognize those who helped us get where we are and allowed us to be part of this august body. And no one embodies that more than my mother. So, Madam Speaker, if you can help me welcome Judy Bishop and Nick Sargent to the chamber.
Will the family of the member from Colchester please rise and be recognized? Member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker. Nobody ever said they couldn't hear me. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was a happy accident that we scheduled this resolution reading honoring Linda Johnson on the first day of Prevent Child Abuse Month in Vermont. Also, members might be interested, there'll be another proclamation reading at noon in the Cedar Creek Room to commemorate this month. And on the State House lawn, you will see the 1,000 blue windmills representing the children of Vermont who deserve safe, healthy, and happy childhoods. All the things that Linda has worked all her life for. We just heard the resolution honoring her, and I first learned about Linda when my niece completed her middle school Change the World project at Prevent Child Abuse Vermont. That was over 20 years ago. But for more than 4 decades, Linda has not only talked about preventing and addressing child abuse, she has also done something about it. From being one of the founders of the Clarina Howard Nichols Center, to working in collaboration with others on the Vermont Sexual Violence Prevention Task Force, to leading Prevent Child Abuse Vermont for decades, to establishing prevention curriculum that is used nationwide, the hallmark of Linda's efforts has always been rooted in compassion and caring, coupled with the understanding that education is at the heart of prevention. Madam Speaker, please recognize Linda Johnson for her 4 decades of making a true difference for so many Vermonters, particularly our children. Thank you.
Will the guest of the member from Waterbury please rise and be recognized? Member from Northfield.
Madam Speaker, we heard a few minutes ago the member from Colchester introducing his parents. And we all know how people will say, oh, you're from Connecticut. You must know so-and-so. And it's pretty silly, of course. So early this session when I told the member from Colchester, oh, you spent some growing up years in New Jersey. So did I. And then we discovered it was the same very small little town in New Jersey that our families overlapped by about 10 years. In that it's a small world category. He was, of course, very much younger than I was at the time. But his mom remembers me because I was involved in small town journalism. So was very pleased to meet them again and also share in his welcome to them.
Are there any further announcements? Member from Berry City.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to ask the body to help us welcome the history and civics classes, the sophomore classes from Spalding with Mr. Sean Dunn and Mr. Greg Gallagher and their students who are up in the gallery there. They're here to visit the State House and met with myself, Representative Booton, Senator Watson, and our Sergeant at Arms for some Q&A this morning, and I'd ask you to help us welcome them.
Will the guest of the member from Berry City please rise and be recognized? Member from Cambridge.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tomorrow is Wednesday, and the Rural Caucus will be meeting from 8 to 8:45 in room 10 and on Zoom. We'll be continuing our discussion of the education proposal through a rural lens and hearing an update on the Vermont State Colleges. All are welcome.
Member from Bennington.
Good morning, Madam Speaker. Just a reminder for all of you, today is Art from the Heart project in the cafeteria starting at 4 o'clock. Come as long as you can or stay for the whole event. It starts at 4 to 6. Special thank you to our very own Molly Burke, who is an art teacher. She'll be on deck to help, as will possibly Representative Lalonde. A special thank you to Agatha, our Sergeant at Arms, as well as David Sheets. But come and have fun, some refreshments, and we'll put a great picture together that hopefully will hang somewhere in the State House. Thank you.
Member from Middlebury.
Madam Speaker, I move that the Committee on Appropriations be relieved of House Bill 67, which is an act relating to legislative operations and government accountability, and that the same be recommitted to the House Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs.
The member from Middlebury moves that the Committee on Appropriations be relieved of House Bill 67, which is an act relating to legislative operations and government accountability, and the same be recommitted to the Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have relieved the Committee on Appropriations of House Bill 67 and recommitted the same to the Committee on Government Operations and Military Affairs. Are there any further announcements? Member from Fairfax. Fairfax.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Every day is a great day for civics. I think today is an even better one. I would ask the House help me welcome Mr. Emery's BFA Fairfax AP Gov class. Mr. Emery does so much great for our students. I think he might be able to give David Sheets a run for his money. He teaches our students so well, so I would love for the body to help me welcome them.
Will the guest of the member from Fairfax please rise and be recognized? Member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I rise for two reasons. First, Linda Johnson is one of the first people I met when I moved to Vermont in 1991, and I served on the Vermont Children's Forum Board with her, and can attest to just how passionate and dedicated and relentless she is about advocating for our most vulnerable children. So I'm thrilled that we have acknowledged and recognized her, and I am sure she will still be in this building advocating for children. So that's the first thing. Speaking of art, I know many of us will be able to be in the cafeteria today to work on the NEAT art project, but I also wanted to let the body know that the Vermont Alzheimer's Association Vermont chapter has their new exhibit up that went up yesterday and will be up for a little while. It is, they're gonna have their artist reception April 10th, but the exhibit is really special. It features artwork from across the state, it's all different mediums, and it aims at raising awareness of the impact of individuals and families that Alzheimer's has. I actually have a student intern from UVM who has been interning there and have been hearing about this project. So when you're doing art later in the cafeteria or eating lunch, check it out and mark your calendars for April 10th for the artist reception. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member from Wolcott.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you could join me in welcoming my friend and former representative from Johnson, Floyd Neese. He is seated in the gallery.
Will the former member please rise and be recognized? Are there any further announcements? Member from Pownell.
Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the fine work of the Rural Caucus, I would invite all who are able to attend to join at 8 a.m. for coffee and some conversation in room 11 tomorrow morning for this kickoff of Manufacturing Day. Thank you very much.
Member from Montpelier.
Madam Speaker, the Working Vermonters Caucus will be meeting tomorrow in room 11 at noon. We'll be hearing from some of our Vermont labor unions, and there will be pizza probably outside the room. It's not allowed, yeah. Cheers, thanks.
Are there any further announcements? Member from Essex.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is Fair Housing Day in the State House, and I would like you to join me in welcoming the Vermont Human Rights Commission, the CVOEO Fair Housing Project, and Migrant Justice for a day full of fair housing-related discussion. And if you hear a lot of Spanish today and need a translator, look for the really tall kid that looks like me without so much hair.
Will the guest and member from Essex please rise and be recognized? Oh. Are there any further announcements? Seeing none. Orders of the day. Members, we will begin with House Bill 494, which is an act relating to capital construction and state bonding. Please listen to the third reading of the bill.
H 494, an act relating to capital construction and state bonding.
The question is, shall the bill pass? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have passed the bill. The final bill on our action calendar today is House Bill 91, which is an act relating to the Emergency Temporary Shelter Program. The bill was referred to the Committee on Human Services, which recommends that the bill be amended as printed in today's calendar. The member from Bridport, Representative McGill, will speak for the committee. In carrying an appropriation, the bill was then referred to the Committee on Appropriations, which recommends that the bill ought to pass when amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services. The member from Burlington, Representative Blumley, will speak for that committee. Please listen to the second reading of the bill.
H 91, an act relating to the Emergency Temporary Shelter Program.
Member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today is April 1st, and it's snowing and it's cold outside, and that's no April Fool's joke. And today, many fellow Vermonters will lose their shelter. We can and we must do better. The bill before us presents a pathway to a better future for helping to address the issue of homelessness in our state. I'm a firm believer that decisions are best made in the most efficient and effective way when they are made closest to the people that they impact. This bill makes the transition to a community-based service system that can be creative, quick-acting, responsive, and most importantly, focused on preventing homelessness. We talk all the time about an affordability crisis in this building and in this state. Well, that affordability crisis is felt each and every day for people who live on SSI or who work full-time jobs in low-paying sectors, or older Vermonters who thought their Social Security would be enough to live on. These folks cannot afford to pay $2,000 a month plus utilities. So yes, we need more housing, but not just any housing. We need more affordable housing. However, in the meantime, we must do what is necessary to give a helping hand to our fellow Vermonters in a way that is more effective than the GA Hotel Motel program has been. Madam Speaker, H91 is a transformative bill. It transforms a major player in state government. It transforms a community-based service system. And most of all, it is our hope that it will help transform the lives of thousands of Vermonters who face homelessness. Madam Speaker, I now yield to the member from Bridport.
The member from Waterbury yields to the member from Bridport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank the member from Waterbury for that introduction and framing. Madam Speaker, we currently have a few different systems in Vermont meant to address the needs of our unhoused neighbors. And while they do have points of intersection, they often run parallel to one another, creating gaps that are felt across our communities. We become stuck in a cycle of using Band-Aids with no real path out of this crisis. I know one thing every member of this body can agree on is that we need more housing. But that will take time, and in the meantime, we must make responsible use of our resources to ensure our vulnerable neighbors can thrive. Currently, we send people to where we have existing resources like hotel rooms, often removing them from their natural support systems and creating additional barriers to stability. This bill instead seeks to send those resources into our communities where they know how to best meet the needs of the people of their region, so that when Vermonters are experiencing homelessness, we can minimize and hopefully prevent further stress and trauma and allow for a smoother transition on to the next chapter of their lives. I will now walk you through the bill and our strike all amendment, which can be found on page 1168 of today's calendar. Madam Speaker, your House Committee on Human Services has taken extensive testimony on H91 over the past few months, and we have heard over and over about the escalation of this crisis since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. Section 1 of this bill includes 9 sobering findings that highlight why this bill is so important and why it is imperative that we act now. Section 2 on page 1169 of your calendar outlines the legislative intent. It states our intent that unsheltered homelessness be eliminated and that homelessness in Vermont be rare, brief, and non-recurring. Under letter B, it then spells out the intent of the program that will be established in Section 3 of this bill. The intent recognizes that this problem will not be solved overnight, but ensures that we continue to take positive steps forward. Section 3 is where the substance of the bill really begins by adding Chapter 22 to 33 VSA. This creates a new program, the Vermont Homelessness Emergency Assistance and Response Transition to Housing Program. It is certainly a mouthful, and so we also made sure to establish a short title, which I will be using going forward, VHearth. Traditionally, the hearth is the center of a home, symbolizing warmth, security, friends and family, connection, and it felt like an excellent representation of what we hope to achieve with this bill. In subsection 2202, you will see that the purpose of this bill is to replace the General Assistance Program, or GA, as well as the Housing Opportunity Grant Program, more frequently referred to as HOP, and instead put any funds or resources associated with these programs and any additional state or federal dollars identified towards the newly established VHearth. Subsection 2303 is our definition section, and subsection 2204 is the establishment language. VHearth will be operated by our state's 5 community action agencies, or CAAs, as well as the statewide organization serving households experiencing or who have experienced domestic or sexual violence to the extent that funds exist. Due to the sensitive nature of their work, our domestic and sexual violence providers operate under and additional strict federal guidelines, it was necessary to have those 2 separate operators so they can remain in compliance and continue to ensure the safety and security of those they serve. We know collaboration is key to eradicating homelessness, so this bill makes certain that our CAAs are working with the federally mandated continuums of care in our state, as well as municipalities, community partners, and our local housing coalitions to make sure supportive services are provided, that extreme event shelters are available when needed, and that our emergency shelters remain in operation after the transition from HOP. It also mandates that shelters and services specific to households experiencing or who have experienced domestic or sexual violence continue to be provided for those populations. In subsection 2205, we dig into supportive services a bit more, outlining the types of services to be made available and offered in each region. Supportive services are essential to helping Vermonters move out of homelessness and preventing it in the first place. This section includes a robust list of those services that must be provided to ensure equity and opportunity, no matter where someone might be experiencing homelessness. Subsection 2206 establishes expectations around extreme weather event shelters, shifting the responsibility to the CAAs and calling on them to collaborate with their community partners and using data to prioritize when and where these shelters will operate, while also considering geographic access. 2207 covers emergency shelters, breaking them into two categories. Temporary shelter, which is meant to be briefer and would include things like temporary use of hotels or motels, but could also include community-based shelter, lease agreements for use of buildings, and needs-specific shelter arrangements. And it leaves room for innovation of other arrangements that will be identified during community planning. Transitional shelter is expected to include households who might stay longer, though those stays may be brief as well. It can include community-based shelter, master grant leases, developing shelter capacity, and again, leaves room for creativity and innovation of other arrangements identified during community planning. Subsection 2208 directs the Department for Children and Families to enter into an agreement with a statewide organization that serves households experiencing or who have experienced domestic or sexual violence to offer shelter and case management services to support those households. 2209 outlines all the duties and expectations of the community action agencies, requiring they serve households experiencing homelessness or at risk of homelessness by providing supportive services, extreme weather event shelter, and emergency shelter. It requires that they have the infrastructure to support households in the region, have the ability to meet the department's reporting requirements and a positive history of reporting compliance, and that they have strong community connections with the providers in their area, and that they provide plain language communications to households receiving services. If a community action agency is unable to fill its responsibilities, DCF and other CAAs or other appropriate community entities will work together to ensure there is never a gap in services and shelter operation in that region. Subsection 210 at the top of page 1174 of your calendar outlines the duties of the Department for Children and Families, along with the Agency of Human Services, including statewide planning, system development, and the involvement of all the agency's departments. We know people experiencing homelessness often need or receive services from multiple departments within the agency outside of those offered by DCF, and collaborative care is vital to ending this crisis. DCF will also provide oversight, monitoring, technical assistance, and support for the community action agencies and the organizations serving survivors of domestic and sexual violence. They will work with both groups to develop a resource allocation method that includes a way to adjust if situations change, using available data, economic indicators, rates of homelessness and rental vacancies, and other variables as appropriate, and then distribute those funds annually. They will identify administrative resources that can be transitioned to our community operations, and they will adopt rules for the implementation of this chapter, including accommodations for individuals with disabilities. In subsection 2211 on page 1175 of your calendar, we get into need assessments and regional planning. Our community action agencies and our continuums of care already engage in these processes regularly. So this subsection builds on that work and ties it together to ensure that planning and development meets the needs of each region and our state. There will be regional needs assessments used to create plans that address progress towards reducing the number of households experiencing homelessness in each region, that assess the rate households are placed in permanent housing but return to homelessness, and the underlying reasons this may happen. They must also identify resources developed and being utilized to address homelessness, as well as the gaps still needing to be filled. This work can then filter into the other planning processes that happen in this state, like those around permanent housing, healthcare, and aging, to ensure we are being strategic in how we allocate our resources and ensuring the best possible outcomes for all Vermonters. The community action agencies from each region will submit their plan to DCF, who will then aggregate them into a single report that will be submitted to the House Committee on Human Services and to the Senate Committee on Health and Welfare. Now, Madam Speaker, I will yield to the member from Northfield.
The member from Bridport yields to the member from Northfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A big question becomes, how do we get there to this transformed program? And it's a big piece of what's before us today, so I'm probably going to go into a little bit more detail. But I think we all recognize there's always a tension in transformation work. There is the need for expediency. We needed this last year. We needed it 2 years ago. But that's balanced against doing it right. I think we all recognize that the current way we address these issues is not right for the people we're trying to help and is not financially sustainable. In fairness, because we always like to point fingers among ourselves, the degree of the problem was not predicted. We've always used hotels and motels as an emergency backup when regular shelters were full, but it was expanded in a very major way as a result of COVID because of the urgency of separate spaces to prevent spread. We received national coverage of Vermont's success in addressing this. But I think the assumption was there that after the crisis, there would be a gradual self-reduction of this as stable housing was found. Even a year ago, it was based on the projected numbers and ability to move people into stability that produced some of the caps, and they seemed reasonable at the time. But I think the degree of the impact of a housing crisis is what was not anticipated. Preset limits that apply to everyone on the length of stay aren't rational if we're trying to help people establish housing, and despite their own best efforts, housing simply isn't there within the time frame and within affordability. So this problem has reached the point of seeming to be intractable, but also clearly unsustainable. That's the need for expedience. And yet we need to get it right. And that can't be done in just a few months. We need to turn from the reaction of getting people sheltered and then trying to help with housing through scattered and often not timely outreach, to transition into an actual program that's effective and efficient in moving people to stability and preventing loss of housing to begin with. The parts of the bill I will walk through lay out the planning to try to best ensure we get it right. Because we can't lay out in advance every part of how to do it. As a committee, we wouldn't have the time, nor are we the right ones to put operational details together. And the current rules or session law are not necessarily the appropriate things to put into statute. But at the same time, we hold the responsibility to ensure that the elements are rational and reasonable. So therefore, the transition to this new system, as outlined by the member from Bridport, are to be developed by DCF, by the administration, and brought to us next February to be ready to start next July so that we can look and evaluate them. The first key operational change addresses the basics of the use of motels and hotels. We don't have enough shelter programs to meet need. And even though we're trying to build more, that can't be achieved quickly enough. We also know that sending people to a hotel to essentially fend for themselves while outreach staff try to connect isn't just inefficient, it often causes harm. Now, we heard testimony from providers about how motel-hotel programs bring better outcomes because of the downsides of shelter programs, lack of privacy, and so forth, and that there were studies based on expanded COVID use that showed it. But actually, the major academic study based on a state that took over a block of hotel space and moved an existing shelter program there. So they created the separation of clients for COVID, but they moved the staff, the meals capacity, the whole program. And that's the model we need to build when and if we do need additional space in hotels or motels during the pendency of the housing crisis. An actual program within the space. So beginning on the top of page 11.7.12 of the new statutory section about the use of hotel and motel rooms, it begins with the existing requirements that any providing emergency shelter have to comply with Department of Health licensed lodging establishment rules and the Department of Public Safety fire and building safety codes, and existing that DCF has to propose the motel and hotel rates as part of the annual budget presentation. And we add that agencies can't use state money to pay for a room that exceeds that rate approved by the General Assembly. But then we get to the fundamental change in how motel and hotel use is envisioned when it's needed. And that is in Part C, that to the extent possible, the agencies, the community agencies, must enter agreements for blocks of rooms, negotiate their use, including access for case management services. In other words, an actual program on the site. And secondly, that they must prioritize the use of these agreements over the old individual per room, per night voucher use, unless it's not appropriate for a specific household. At the bottom of page 1176, you'll see section 4, the program's Implementation Advisory Committee. This may be a little bit of a cart before the horse in terms of sections because you haven't seen the implementation plan yet. But this creates a temporary advisory committee to provide advice and recommendations to DCF and to the community action agencies as they develop the plan on design, implementation, and transition, specifically including advice on the implementation plan that you'll see in section 5. So we start with the membership on page 1177. It lays out, reminds us of the importance of reflecting growing diversity among Vermonters, and then sets out the members, 5 representatives with actual lived experience of homelessness, 5, 1 each from each of the community action agencies that will be taking this on, a representative from the Chittenden County Homeless Alliance, and a representative from the Balance of State Continuum of Care. Those are both the federal continuum of cares for the division into the 2 pieces of the state. There will be 5 representatives of local housing coalitions, including at least 2 who are shelter providers, and then the Deputy Commissioner of DCF's Economic Services Division and the DCF Office of Economic Opportunity. So this is the hands-on group that will give advice to DCF as it develops the plan. The rest are the standard administrative, technical, legal assistance of DCF, the meetings, first meeting on or before July 15, selection of co-chairs, a majority is a quorum. Importantly, they can then divide into subcommittees that can include individuals who aren't on the committee, including representatives of individuals who are among the groups that are directly served by the program. Continuing on to page 1178, we have the standard per diem compensation for advisory members and the fact that it sunsets on July 1st of 2029. But next we have the heart of the real life operations that will take shape in order to transition into a wholly new program. That's the implementation plan that has to be prepared and presented to the General Assembly's committees by February 1st of 2026. DCF is responsible for it. They have to do it in collaboration with the community action agencies, and they have to consult with the other departments of the Agency of Human Services, as well as the advisory committee. You heard reference by the member from Bridport, the importance of other AHS departments that are segregated off currently, and yet that all run different programs for some of these different groups that are in need of affordable housing and can't access it. The implementation plan must address, these aren't options, must address a series of items. Funding allocations among the community action agencies and the other providers, identify any other resources, including state or federal, then the appropriate measures and methods of accountability for the community action agencies and the Domestic and Sexual Violence Partner Organization and community partners. Fourth, very key towards the kinds of services. You saw a long list of services, but they are not every service for every person. What needs to be identified as part of the implementation plan is what are the appropriate services that need to be provided for people in different levels of shelter, if they're at risk of homelessness, or they're actually unsheltered out on the street. Number 5, needing to establish a standard appeals process with an expedited basis as well. 6, expanded use of the 211 call system so that we ensure coordination, one intake place, one source of information. The next 3, 7, 8, and 9, are really critical elements. Number 7 is whether someone's continuation in emergency shelter should include specific expectations, such as household participation in case management services or other expectations like caps on the night limit use of hotels or motels. And if so, what should those elements be and under what circumstances? They're not always right for every person in every circumstance. So when we create these expectations, we may need to align them in a way that's effective and efficient in our goals. Continuing on page 1179, it includes whether the use of emergency shelter should include financial participation, and if so, what it should include. In some programs, there's an expectation of a certain amount of income, assuming a household even has income. In others, that resource is required to be put aside in savings for the housing, the permanent housing that the person is seeking. So that needs to be specifically identified how that will occur. Next, one of the real tough issues that we have tried to deal with haphazardly and unsuccessfully is the issue of prioritization. We have a list of eligible people and everybody else isn't eligible. And that list is in some ways too wide and in other ways maybe too narrow. So we need the people on the front line to help identify and DCF to be the ones to put together the plan for how one prioritizes when we don't have enough shelters or even when we have to use hotel, motel, enough capacity for everyone. So those categories must be a part of the plan. 10 is how to best ensure there's equitable access. 11 is the appropriate level of what the intake and assessment processes should occur for each of the categories of people being served. And then any anticipated challenges that need a legislative solution. Those are all the pieces that DCF will be expected to bring to us next February. We all know that the best outcomes of this plan will not and cannot fix homelessness. That's not part of this bill's proposal, because only the creation of more housing can do that, and that takes time. But this is our best attempt in the interim to fix how we help people in their moment of crisis, how we ensure a safety net, not leave people on the street. We can't strand them, but we will remain limited by resources. If I had my druthers, we would always have the ability for a very basic roof over the head of anyone who's seeking it, who has no shelter at all, without exception. And we would always have the housing capacity for people to have stable, affordable homes. But when we can't achieve that, and we can't achieve it right now, we need to be doing our best to give the right kind of help, not abandoning people in motel rooms, but the right kind of supportive help to move them forward. This is a proposal for that path forward. Madam Speaker, I now yield to the member from Rutland.
The member from Northfield yields to the member from Rutland.
Madam Speaker, I'm just going to speak briefly on behalf of Section 6, which can be located on page 1179. Section 6 updates the enabling statute of the community action agencies primarily to modernize outdated language to more respectful language. It also broadens their services to include helping people in low-income households to have access to safe, secure, permanent housing. The bill also changes the Community Action Agency statute to allow each community action agency to set term limits for its board members in its own bylaws rather than having term limits imposed on them through the statute. The community action agencies have been required to complete a need assessment every 3 years and a specific plan every year that is related to that needs assessment. The bill would add the specific requirements to include planning with community partners to operate VHERTH into the community action agency planning process. To sum up Section 6 briefly, changes that are made community service agencies to community action agencies throughout. Updates antiquated words and phrases throughout. It cross-references VHERTH regional need assessments and authorizes each community action agency board to adopt its own term. Madam Speaker, I now yield the floor to the member from Waterbury.
The member from Rutland City yields to the member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to address sections 7 and 8 of the bill, and I do want to note that there is a fiscal note on the House Human Services webpage. In order to do the transformation that we're talking about here correctly, we need to allow a significant amount of time and planning for that to happen for all of the parties involved. At the outset of this process, culminating in this bill, I was clear with our committee, with DCF, with advocates and providers, that our committee would not be increasing the funding beyond the base year of FY25, the year that we are in right now. In FY25, there was $10 million appropriated in one-time funding that is currently being used for shelter development. 30 years ago, when we transitioned out of institutional care for people with developmental disabilities at the Brandon Training School, we had to maintain the infrastructure at the campus while we were building the community system. The General Assembly back then appropriated what was called bridge funding to bridge the gap between the transfer of resources from the ultimate closure of that facility to the community services that needed to ramp up prior to the closing. We have the same concept here in H91. In FY26, the transition year, $10 million is appropriated for transition expenses, for bridging the gap between the existing system and the new system. These funds are already accounted for in the budget that this body passed last week. During FY26, all the parties involved will need funding to ramp up their organizations. For instance, the community action agencies will need to add staff, upgrade IT systems, do extensive training, and potentially add operating space. Because DCF will continue to operate the existing programs during FY26, the operating expenses at the department will not be able to transition to the community until FY27. The same is true for the Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, as well as any enhancements needed at 211. DCF and each community action agency will also each need the assistance of a project manager to assist in this process. Additionally, as part of the transition, continued development of shelters, including some population-specific shelters, will be developed, and funding for that is also included within the $10 million. There is $3 million appropriated for that. And in Section 8, Madam Speaker, as I previously noted, this section identifies legislative intent with regard to the potential for future funding. It does not and cannot, however, appropriate funding for FY27 before the legislature considers budgets for next year. I now yield back to the member from Rutland City.
The member from Waterbury yields to the member from Rutland City.
Section 9 of this bill, very straightforward. The act shall take effect on July 1st, 2025, except that Section 3, the Vermont Homeless Emergency responsive transition to housing program shall take effect on July 1st, 2026. Madam Speaker, testimony was taken from the following. Get ready, it's going to be a minute. Legislative Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel. Principal Fiscal Analysis, the Joint Fiscal Office. 3 people with lived experience. Executive Director and 4 members from the Vermont Interfaith Action. Executive Director, the Vermont State Housing Authority. Special Programs Manager of Vermont State Housing Authority. Director of Community Relations, Champlain Housing Trust, not even 10% through. Executive Director of the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, the Administrator of the Bennington Housing Authority. Assistant Executive Director, Groundworks Collaborative. Director of Family and Community Support Services, Capstone Community Action. Housing First Program Director, Pathways Vermont. Co-Executive Director, Good Samaritan Haven Barrie. Executive Director of the Upper Valley Haven. Executive Director of Lamoille County House. Executive Director, COTS Burlington. Executive Director, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Director of Policy and Special Projects, Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. Youth Advocacy Coordinator, Elevate Youth Services. Return House Director, Elevate Youth Services. YDP Director, Elevate Youth Services. Executive Director of End Homelessness Vermont. Executive Director, Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont. Consultant of Housing Innovations. Supportive and Affordable Housing Consult. Public Health Research, Dartmouth College. Special Assistant to End Homelessness, City of Burlington. Chief of the Brattleboro Police Department. Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, Vermont League of Cities and Towns. Municipal Policy and Advocacy Specialist, Vermont League of City and Towns. Homeless Response Coordinator, City of Rutland. Executive Director, Rutland Homeless Prevention Center. Interim Executive Director, Director of Operations, United Ways of Vermont, Vermont 211. Policy Advocate, ACLU of Vermont. Staff Attorney, Vermont Legal Aid. Legislative Specialist, Vermont Legal Aid. Policy and Research Analysis, Office of Racial Equity. Co-Executive Director, Vermont Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. Executive Director, Vermont Center for Independent Living. Representative, Vermont Community Action Partnership. Director of Early Childhood Advocacy Alliance. Commissioner of the Department of Corrections. Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Deputy Commissioner of Vermont Department of Health. Deputy Commissioner, Department of Mental Health. Deputy Commissioner of Economic Services Division, Department for Child and Families. Director of Office of Economic Opportunity, Department for Child and Families. Director of Communication and Legislative Affairs, Department for Child and Families. Madam Speaker, the House Committee voted 9-1 on this bill. I was not present for the vote. If present, my vote was yes. I believe this program over time will reduce unilateral and collateral costs and reduce the need for emergency housing over time. Thank you.
And now speaking for the Committee on Appropriations, the member from Burlington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. House Appropriations thanks the Human Services Committee for H91. The bill requests an appropriation of $10 million to facilitate the transition to the community-based programs described earlier. This appropriation would bring the level of spending in FY26 equal to that in FY25 and would be, as you heard, used to build capacity within community providers, transition systems and responsibilities currently housed at DCF, and further develop state shelter capacity. Any major shift in systems change requires that we be honest about the groundwork required for its success, and this investment lays that groundwork. House Appropriations was aware that this bill would be coming to our committee and held $10 million available for this purpose in the FY26 budget. Your House Committee on Appropriation recommends that the bill ought to pass by a vote of 8-3-0.
So the question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Rutland City.
Yes, Madam Speaker, my apology. Math was never my forte. The vote out of the committee was 8-1, not 9-1, 8-1.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Are you ready for the question? If so, member from Poultney.
Madam Speaker, while I agree with the concept of H91, the price tag is too steep. Adding an additional $10 million in one-time funds to the governor's recommended $70.3 million is a high price tag. Going forward, the proposed bill states we will use the FY25 budgeted amount of $81.97 million. Additionally, as we are all painfully aware, one-time funds many times become yearly funding, which means we'll be adding the $10 million to the FY25 number for a total of almost $92 million to run the program. My other concern with this budget is the workforce needed to stand up such a program. I have heard time and time again from my area's community action agency that they cannot find help to hire. Where are the individuals needed to stand up such a program going to come from when the community action agencies cannot field a workforce for their current workload? It seems the new VHearth program will provide the same or like services that are currently provided by the General Assistance Housing Program and the Housing Opportunities Grant Program. A $10 million price tag is a stiff price tag for two programs to meld into one. I cannot support a program that will cost an additional $10 to $20 million without seeing any change in solving our housing crisis. What is glaringly obvious to me is we do not have adequate housing to house individuals. And the reason we do not have adequate housing is we make it too difficult to build and rehab existing housing due to our permitting process and Act 250. Until we allow growth for housing, we will never solve our housing crisis. We make it so difficult and extremely restrictive to build housing. We have a growing homeless population because we do not allow real growth in housing.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, today, right now, today, in Vermont, people are being removed from shelter. Some will have no option but to sleep outside tonight. Tonight. That's not a hypothetical, it's not an abstract, it is real and it is happening on our watch. If we're going to maintain an economy where poverty is not only predictable but necessary, where entire sectors depend on labor that's underpaid, undervalued, and where workers are left unable to afford even basic shelter, then we have to be honest about what that means. It means that this state has an obligation, not a charitable instinct, but a responsibility to care for the people we leave behind. And no, this is not an attack on capitalism. It is a recognition that unchecked systems left to their own devices will concentrate wealth and push people out. Our job is not necessarily to end that system, but our job is to intervene when it fails to serve the people that we all represent. Some will say this costs too much. I will ask, compared to what? Because we are already paying the price in emergency rooms, in police response, and more importantly, in human suffering, and the slow erosion of our moral credibility. VHearth is not radical. It's not a giveaway. It is a structured, strategic response to a crisis. It ends the night-by-night scramble. It prioritizes housing with dignity. And it meets people where they are without asking them to earn the basic right to be warm and safe. If we can't pass this bill, then let's at least be honest with Vermonters. We're choosing not to act. We're choosing to let people sleep outside in the cold when we have this path forward in front of us. I won't make that choice, and I don't think most of you will either.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Sheldon.
Madam Speaker, we have spent hundreds of millions of dollars on the failing hotel motel program since the beginning of the pandemic. Hundreds of millions. We've been relying on one-time funding, which we know will not last forever. The taxpayers simply cannot afford to spend at this level in perpetuity. Imagine how many more shelter beds we could have brought online instead. Moving this work to community organizations is an intriguing concept, but not if this ends up being more than $40 million a year in base funding. Homelessness has gotten worse in Vermont because Vermont has become too unaffordable. If the majority wants to help address one of the root causes of this crisis, we should take seriously the need to reduce the cost of living in Vermont and reduce the cost of housing. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Colchester.
Madam Speaker, I am proud to stand today in support of H91. H91 is born out of experiences, testimony, collaborations, expertise, and more that preceded the start of this current session. I am thankful and humbled by the knowledge base and the lived experiences that shaped those conversations. I hope and think that there is a shared recognition that we entered this session ready to identify how Vermont can do better in how we build, deliver, and support a network of services to lift up some of our most vulnerable neighbors, our fellow Vermonters who are homeless. Madam Speaker, since you gavelled us in back in early January, your Committee on Human Services heard testimony over the course of 16 days, spending an additional part of 7 days in marking up this bill and engaging in committee discussion. I would venture to say that there are a few bills, short of the education bill and the money bills, that have garnered this much focus and scrutiny. As a first-term member of this body, what I found incredibly heartening was the thoroughness of this process. As you have heard, the witness list was long and diverse. What a simple list does not capture was the collaborative nature of the work that helped us reach the bill that we have before us today. I can tell you that the various parties engaged in those conversations were not happy at every stage of this process. But through continued conversation, the thoughtful reworking of aspects of the bill, and an openness to ensure that we get it right, we have before us the opportunity for transformative gains in how we can support those experiencing homelessness in Vermont and those at risk of homelessness. The passion of the advocates was matched by the commitment of our state partners in government to help ensure that for the first time, we produce a comprehensive program. Leaders at all levels of the Agency of Human Services were engaged, from the Secretary to the department heads, perhaps none more vital than the near constant presence during the markup of this bill of the Director of DCF's Office of Economic Opportunity. I want to personally thank her for her contributions to this bill. While I've spoken about the process, I know that I will leave this work with many stories and images of why this work is among the most important I believe we will accomplish this session. One particularly impactful witness was the City of Burlington's Special Assistant to End Homelessness. Our safety net of shelters and vouchers still leaves far too many outside, always a brutal existence, but never more so than during a Vermont winter. This witness spoke of the 8 or 9 nights this winter that they had at that point opened the city's extreme weather shelter. On average, 75 people sought respite, some who lived with complex medical issues, including incontinence. Some individuals would arrive with their clothing literally frozen to their bodies and needed to be cut off. Others arrived in desperate need of wound care and had a hope that there would be fire, EMS, or medical personnel who could help as volunteers and change the wounds, redress those wounds before morning, when the shelter resident would again return to living outdoors. We know that this work is difficult and we will never be perfect. We also know that our current system has fallen short. I have hope, however, because of a thoroughly and thoughtfully reimagined approach to addressing our crisis of homelessness that has been brought to this floor today, that we have a collective opportunity as a body to bring about change. Let's not miss this opportunity for system change, but most importantly, to make a real and positive difference in the lives of our homeless neighbors. I urge you to support H91. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Berkshire.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If we're going to truly solve the problem of homelessness in Vermont, we need to address the high cost of housing. We have poured, as you heard, hundreds of millions of dollars into housing over my time in the legislature, but we are not getting our money's worth. It is too expensive and too difficult to build the kinds of homes that we need in our state. Unfortunately, it has not been taken seriously, the need to fix Act 250 and the permitting process that will help developers build the kind of affordable housing we need, particularly in rural areas. House Republicans and the governor have advocated for years that this body take permitting reform seriously, but many have refused to take the action that is needed. Had we taken regulatory reform seriously, instead of just nibbling around the edges, this crisis would not exist today. Time has run out. To my colleagues, I urge you to work together, put your personal priorities aside, and have the difficult conversations that will result in essential housing for all Vermonters. Thank you.
Member from South Burlington.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H91. For too many Vermonters, the transition from emergency housing to permanent housing is taking months, not weeks. This stark shift is a crisis that demands our immediate attention. The programs we rely on to provide shelter are outdated and underfunded, and they must be adjusted to meet the needs of today. We cannot afford to wait any longer. People need help now. When our neighbors are forced to sleep in cars, on the streets, or wherever they can find shelter, it is not just a tragedy for those individuals and families, it affects all of us. It increases costs for emergency medical services, places undue strain on our public safety workers, healthcare providers, and community organizations. We are all impacted by this crisis. H91 represents a long-term, comprehensive plan to address homelessness in our state. While homelessness is fundamentally a housing issue, we must also recognize the critical need for wraparound services. That's why H91 acknowledges that to end homelessness, we must not only provide shelter, but also the support necessary to help individuals transition to permanent housing and stability. Madam Speaker, the need for action is clear. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting H91. Let's take this critical step forward in addressing homelessness and supporting our most vulnerable neighbors.
Member from Ferrisburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I had not originally planned to get up and speak on this bill, but hearing my fellow colleagues speak on it today, I feel compelled to stand up and just share some realities. The reporter of the bill noted that we can and we must do better, and I absolutely agree with that, but this bill does nothing to solve the real and underlying problems. It's just putting a bigger and more expensive Band-Aid on the existing broken structure that we have. To me, this bill is emblematic of where our state is right now. It's a classic lukewarm cup of coffee. It's not a nice piping hot drink that has all the teeth and the legislation that we would really need to solve the other underlying problems. And it's not a nice ice cold iced coffee that would really satisfy you. But it's just this lukewarm, expensive set of questions that we need yet to answer in Section 5. And I agree with the member from Northfield that Section 5 is the heart of the bill, but all it does is pose a list of questions that we need yet to answer. And if we just look back at what we're paying, $81 million for what the bill says is 3,458 people to be housed. The simple math is that's $23,000 per person. For a small family group of 3, say a mother and 2 small children, that's $69,000 for 80 days of housing. To me, that just seems absurd. And to put that into regular terms, $69,000, that'd be a pretty nice mortgage payment on some actual housing. The $23,000 per person is greater than the per diem, quite a bit greater than the per diem that we all get for the 80 days that we're here in session. It would be my suggestion that we take the great concepts and the intent, I love the intent of this bill, but to marry it with real housing legislation to encourage landlords to actually rent out the facilities that they have and to encourage real affordable housing to be built. And unless this Band-Aid is paired with real legislation to fix the underlying problem, I can't support it. Thank you.
Member for Middlebury.
Madam Speaker, for 5 years, we have been saying that the GA Emergency Housing Voucher Program should be a temporary response to homelessness. For 5 years, we have been asking the administration to develop a plan to replace this program, which is only designed to put a temporary roof over people's heads, not to solve the homelessness problem. And we have received nothing from the administration. So I am grateful that the House Human Services Committee has opted to pick up the reins and work long and thoughtfully to create a comprehensive program that will truly get Vermonters out of homelessness. For those that are contemplating voting against this bill, I ask, what is the alternative and how are you working towards a solution? I will be voting yes.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Milton.
Madam Speaker, this bill sets aside an additional $10 million on top of the tens of millions for the General Assistance Emergency Housing Program. We simply cannot afford it. We have so many competing priorities, and continuing to invest in a failed system won't work. With potential federal cuts coming, we'll have to make difficult choices to protect the most vulnerable. Vermonters want us to fix, not just fund the problems we have. Unless we're serious about fixing the housing crisis, this problem will only get worse and more expensive.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, during the debate, we heard this bill before us referred to as a lukewarm cup of coffee, but let me offer a different symbol. This bill is a glass of wine at room temperature. It takes the edge off of a very stressful situation while stimulating the immune system and while encouraging the body to produce new blood cells to fight off infection and to create greater balance in the system. It doesn't solve the problem, but it's a step forward. Something that's concerning to me is after 8 years, every time we bring forward a proposed solution, people complain about the cost. And it makes me wonder when the way people talk about those being served in our motels, who were we really trying to protect during the pandemic? Were we trying to keep the most vulnerable safe, or were we trying to keep the privileged safe from those dirty people who might make them sick? I really wonder. We are in a situation now where we have failed to spend wisely, but that is not entirely the fault of this body. For many years, we have offered proposals to transition from the motel program to other options like buying the motels and converting them, creating tiny home villages, amongst other things. I can make a whole list. And these ideas get shot down over and over again. But then we see a shelter for 30-something families created that costs far more than the motel programs by the very same administration that complains about the cost of the motel program. So I just don't know what they want. We have heard the governor say that we need to wean people off the system. And Madam Speaker, this language creates great stigma for people. When we talk about weaning people off the system, we're often referring to animals and to children. However, what does a wise caretaker do when you wean an animal or a child? You don't throw them outside to starve. That is not weaning people off the system. It's transitioning them to a diet that's appropriate for their stage of development. And I feel like this legislation before us is the best we can do at this time to create a transition. One last thing, we continue to hear that regulatory barriers are the problem and that we're not building enough housing. And I do agree that we're not building enough housing, but I would like to remind my fellow members that it's not just housing, it's the kind of housing. And that for years we have built housing that is inaffordable. We have allowed developers who have funded campaigns in this last election and turned the course of races around this state, that these developers have not developed properties that they're holding, which drives up the profits they're making off the properties they hold. We have allowed people to extract wealth, the few to extract wealth from the many for too long. We really need to rethink about how do we encourage a wide range of housing so that we can make sure everyone gets the housing they need. That just removing regulatory barriers is going to just make this problem worse. So we have to both reduce the barriers and encourage and incentivize the development of the kind of housing we need to make sure that we can provide housing for all. Thank you.
Member for Morristown.
Madam Speaker, I rise in support of H91, sorry. What I will not do is dehumanize the humans we are talking about by referring to them as objects or drinks or other things. I will say this. This morning, in my other job outside of this, because we all have many jobs, I sat on our local interagency networking team, which is sort of our continuum of care, where we have members of our community, of our Capstone Community Action Agency, our housing, our local housing shelter, domestic violence agency, all the very people we are talking about. The agencies where I sit on meetings every month and watch my colleagues bear the burden of the people they are trying to support with the lack of resources. Secondhand trauma is real, and it is not just the people experiencing homelessness. I'm going to come back to that momentarily, but I want to talk about the people who are working hard, tirelessly, boots on the ground, trying to put out fires while we are in this building saying we need a better solution. Yes, yes, and yes, this is not enough. Yes, we need this, and we need more. I just left my colleagues this morning, and I said, I'm going to come in here and do the best we can. This is a start. Interim, transition, long-term. A plan that was well thought out by many parties involved, people with lived experience, experts, all of the above. Will it get the job done? No. Is it a start? Absolutely. And I want to circle back to the humans to whom this is intended to serve and protect. For the new members of the body who weren't here, who don't know this, I am a person who's experienced chronic homelessness. I have utilized our state's hotel motel system. The trauma and harm that you go through. Yes, it's a roof over your head, but please believe, Madam Speaker, it is not the one we want. However, it is a tool until we can get on our feet. It is a step towards sustainability. It is a step towards security. And if we don't provide Vermonters with the opportunity to find that footing for their success, we are not doing our jobs. So, Madam Speaker, I will implore my colleagues in this building to support my colleagues outside of this building and vote yes in supporting H91.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Georgia. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thought you said Georgia, but I wasn't sure. So, some troubling decisions face us this morning. Madam Speaker, may I please inquire of the initial reporter of the bill, the chair of the committee?
The member from Waterbury is interrogated.
So, Madam Speaker, I'm going to try to keep emotion out of my questions, although I certainly feel emotion, as many around us have expressed this morning. But you also know that I tend to be very careful with our money in everything we do, in committee and in our conversations in the hall. Money comes from people who work hard to earn it. So, member, why does this cost so much? I read over, while we were listening to the report, the fiscal report. I don't see in here really any explanation as to why this cost is rising so much. Can you tell us why this costs so much? The increase just from last year is phenomenal.
Thank you, member. Madam Speaker, actually, we have been reducing the amount that's appropriated in this line item. Just 2 years ago, it was over 55 million. This year is a fiscal note right here says, I'm not looking at the total, but in what we were spending in the hotel and motel program. We were spending over 55 million just in the hotels and motels 2 years ago. This year was appropriated about 44.8 million, and then we have to look at one time as well as base funding. And then next year, the governor is proposing the 30.5 in one time, as well as the base of 7.5. So actually the cost is decreasing over time, Madam Speaker, and not increasing. And the cost of homelessness is expensive. It requires supportive services to individuals. It's probably of no surprise to people that lots of these folks have complicated lives, and the trauma that they experience just being homeless is something that requires support. And unfortunately, in hotels, they don't really get as much support as is necessary, frankly. And when we look at the creation of VHearth, we're talking about combining what's existing in the Housing Opportunity Program, as well as what is being spent right now in the hotel motel quote unquote program. And that will enable our community partners to focus much more on preventing homelessness. It might surprise people to understand and learn that a large portion of people who are placed into permanent housing return to homelessness, yet we don't really know why. The department doesn't know why. We haven't really unlocked the reasons behind that. That's just repeating the work that we have to do here. And so we want to prevent that from happening and understand that better. To operate full-blown shelters, some of the shelters, we've talked about witnesses that we heard, like at Groundworks or, the Upper Valley Haven or here in central Vermont. Running a well-run shelter is expensive to do. It's at over $125 a night for individuals. So when we look at a combination of all of these things, I just want to be clear to the body that actually what we have been spending has been decreasing over the last few years and has not been increasing.
Decreasing, okay.
Yes, member, or Madam Speaker, sorry.
Okay, I appreciate that answer. Thank you, member. I have volunteered from time to time in a homeless shelter in St. Albans, and I'm no professional in this area. Believe me, I just go in and do simple work. But it has appeared to me that the people least likely to return to us in that shelter are those who receive training, some job skill, or have a job or an apprenticeship that they can go out to, and it seems to give them hope, a reason and a method by which they can support themselves. So money is a significant factor. If we read these charts so that we interpret it as a decreasing amount from year to year, well, that's about as optimistic as we can get. What matters here is the population, not the money. The population is affected most, the people, Madam Speaker.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Milton.
I too am fiscally responsible, and while I see some good pieces in
Member,
H91,
can you use the mic, please?
while I too am fiscally responsible, while I do see some good pieces in H91, as I am on the Human Services Committee, there are parts that I do have concerns with. One concern is the additions we need to, one concern is what Representative Wood said is the $10 million to add the many needed positions to implement the new H91. I found from being a past school board member for 9 years that we would be thrilled to get a grant and get the monies and then find out after we kept the positions, and which put a burden on the already struggling taxpayers because we chose to keep the positions and then we couldn't pass the budgets. So I guess what I'm saying is once the 10 million for all the extra positions is used up, who's going to pay for it?
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Member from Putney.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to support this bill. I appreciate that we have a bill before us that's actually a plan. There appears to be well thought out ideas in it that we're going to try and implement. And I want to acknowledge, though, that there are more challenges. And as someone who is living in the town that has become the poster child of how a small well-funded group can stop a project for 3 years, I do realize we need some more regulatory reform. However, I did take notice that when the Speaker organized us for a caucus of the whole before we started the session, we had Alex Farrell from the Department of Housing and Community Development here speaking, I assume for the administration, about how the regulatory reform we have put out there is working and how it is getting housing built now. So I want to acknowledge the work that we have done. We could do more. And again, I want to applaud the committee for the work they've done on this, and I plan to vote for this.
Are you ready for the question? Member from Hartford.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In making budgetary choices, it appears more financially predictable and conservative to me to spend hard-earned taxpayer dollars on supportive services run by our local Vermont agencies that make our communities stronger, rather than in overnight hospital stays and visits in our carceral facilities. The upfront cost in front of us is minimal compared to the millions we spend each year in these areas, which we often track less closely in our budget discussions. H91 provides us with an opportunity to be more transparent and economical in our spending choices.
Are you ready for the question? Member from Northfield.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Nobody wants homelessness. We've had years to act on this crisis, yet we've made it more expensive to live here. This horrible situation could have been handled much better years ago. We knew we had a problem years before I got elected to this body, which, believe it or not, was 7 years ago. The governor has offered many options, and I agree with him on most of them. There is nothing affordable about housing to anyone. In my mind, it's time we hold ourselves accountable and fix this crisis. Thank you.
Are you ready for the question? Member from Waterbury.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I just wanted to provide a few facts and responses to some of the comments that have been made. One of the things that homelessness does is impact our healthcare system quite dramatically. When people, the people we heard about and actually have met here in the last few weeks, when they don't have shelter, they end up in emergency rooms at hospitals, the most expensive place in a hospital. One of the members spoke to the need for things like job skills. Absolutely. We 100% agree. That's one of the supportive services that would be available to people under this bill, is the ability to utilize our partners at the Department of Disabilities, Aging, and Independent Living in providing job skills and training and interviewing and all of those kinds of things for individuals. That's part of the supports here. Substance use treatment and counseling, domestic violence and protection from people who are seeking to harm others. Those are all things that are provided in this bill. And I think one of the things that is going unnoticed is the fact that, yes, for the time being, it is anticipated that in some parts of the state, perhaps not even in all parts of the state, but in some parts of the state, there will be a need to continue to use on a reduced level, frankly, that we hope, the use of hotels and motels. But I want to call attention to the sections of the bill that prioritize the use of agreements made with hotels and motels for blocks of rooms where we essentially run a shelter within a hotel. That is what is anticipated here, and that is quite different from what is occurring now. In that situation, people would have access to supportive services that they need and referrals to other supports at the Agency of Human Services. So I think that is quite a bit different than what we are talking about existing right now. I also need to point out that in a much loved program that many people like, the Vermont Home Improvement Program or Housing Improvement Program, VHIP, that earlier this year, the administration was proposing to reduce the priority, to eliminate it, in fact, in one section of the VHIP program, saying that landlords wouldn't rent to people who are homeless in the 10-year program. Luckily, with the assistance of the Housing and General Committee, we were able to get that to 30%. And still, affordable housing in Vermont, we are still only at roughly 30% of those that may be delegated to people who are homeless. At that rate, Madam Speaker, it's going to be many years before we solve the homelessness problem in this state. And in the meantime, we need to do what is right, what is humane for the people in our state. And I urge you to support H91.
Member from Stowe.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. First of all, I would like to thank the leadership of the Human Services and the members of Human Services for what I consider to be some of the most thoughtful and proactive legislation that in my 3 years I've heard in this body. So I rise to say I'm going to support H91, and I really appreciate the work of the committee to actually look forward in a comprehensive way to be supportive of those who are unhoused. While I'm traditionally more of a fiscal conservative, I feel very supportive of this bill, that it's in the best interest of all of our communities in our state. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Are you ready for the question? Member from Essex Junction.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong support of H91. Every year in this body, we address several complex issues at once. We are doing it again this year. This body just passed a bipartisan housing bill, and we've invested $60 million in housing in the budget that we just passed. 5,000 units of housing and shelter units have been created over the last 4 years. H91 addresses another aspect of our housing crisis, the unhoused, moving us to a long-term strategic program. As we continue to work on our housing crisis, we must also continue our work to protect our most vulnerable. H91 represents a comprehensive approach to addressing homelessness in Vermont by establishing a dedicated program focused on providing immediate shelter and facilitating transitions to permanent housing. Empowering the community action agencies and other community providers will generate regional solutions that utilize and build upon the existing structure of providers and services. The bill emphasizes the need for systematic changes to reduce and ultimately eliminate homelessness in the state, something we should all strive for. I thank your Human Services Committee for their thoughtful and detailed process in bringing H91 to the floor. I'm voting yes for the constituent I talked with last night who is facing homelessness, and I encourage the body to vote yes.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Are you ready for the question? If so, member from Cabot.
I'm going to support this bill. But the thing that we're doing is we're taking resources away from the working class Vermonters to help these people. And I'm one of those that's willing to do that. The thing that we need to do, I think, as a body, and is one of the things I think I'm most concerned about, and is the reason why I'm here. I'm a farmer, been farming my whole life. It has not been an easy road. I haven't looked for handouts, and I know a lot of people in this state who have lived the same life as me. The money that we take in to this state is blood, sweat, and tears for many people. And that's why we need to be fiscally responsible with the money that comes before us. I think the other thing that we need to focus on as a body is removing barriers to our working class. Housing is one of them. I was glad to report on H401 to remove barriers for people that are just looking to make a few pies out of their own kitchens. That has to be, if we're going to put so much energy and focus on the most vulnerable, which I am all in for, we need to put just as much energy, if not more, into our working class and how we can sometimes just get out of the way so that they have opportunity to thrive. So I just want to get that point across to this body that please, 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 I think the message was loud and clear this fall with the way that people voted. Our working class want us to support them. And then a lot of times that means just getting out of the way. So if we're gonna take money from the working class one more time to help out our most vulnerable, which again, I agree with, then let's put time and energy and come up with real answers for our working class. Thank you.
The question is, shall the bill be amended as recommended by the Committee on Human Services? Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and you have amended the bill. Now the question is, shall the bill be read a third time? Are you ready for that question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and third reading is ordered. Members, that completes the orders of the day. Are there any announcements? Member from Winooski.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm thrilled to introduce a group of truly impressive 11th and 12th graders from Winooski High School: Mackenzie, Alexis, Leo, Benti, Teo, Sam, and Albina. They are part of the Culture and Community Capstone class and are here today to do advocacy for the Fair Housing Awareness Day. They are joined by Winooski High School teacher Annie Schneider and Winooski School librarian Matt Guile. Please join me in welcoming this remarkable group of students to the People's House.
Will the guest of member from Winooski please rise and be recognized? Are there any further announcements? Member from Chittenden.
Madam Speaker, as we know, today is April Fool's, and there may have been an email sent out by one of our colleagues this morning with breaking news. I assure you I am not in first place in the women's basketball pool. But I would also like to say downstairs in appropriations, our committee is usually pretty good about adding and subtracting. But some of our members are not real good on the calendar, and I think they thought last week was April Fool's. Because I alluded to it during my presentation last week on the budget, but I came downstairs, I haven't made the mistake of leaving my computer on, and there was a note on my computer screen as if I wrote it, which I assure you, Madam Speaker, I did not. Dear Madam Speaker, though I have loved my time as a legislator, I just can't take it anymore. Besides, I am in last place in the March Madness tournament, and it's just too much for me. I hereby tender my resignation, effective immediately. Madam Speaker, that was April Fool's, and it wasn't even close to April 1 when that was written, so please bear with me. Getting on to the real news of the day. I'm afraid that all good things must come to an end. The chair of Human Services has slipped to second. Our new leader is Holly Taylor, our State House Visitors Services Coordinator. And in the all-important team standing, the former members, who obviously have more time to do their research before making their selections, are currently in first place. But on their heels in second is Holly and the Doorkeepers. Sounds like a rock group. And in third place is House Human Services. More to come. Thank you.
Member from Waterbury.
Madam Speaker, I'm sure you're all, tired of listening to me today. And you may be even more tired when I have to wish the member from Fairfield a very happy birthday today because, he can be a pain in the neck sometimes, but we still love him.
Happy birthday, member. Are there any further announcements? Member from Essex Junction.
Madam Speaker, House Democrats will meet in room 11, 5 minutes after the adjournment for a short caucus. Thank you.
Member from Poultney.
Madam Speaker, House Republicans will meet immediately following adjournment in room 10.
Member from Burlington.
Madam Speaker, the House Progressive Caucus will meet in room 44, 15 minutes after the floor.
Are there any further announcements? Seeing none. Member from Essex, my apologies.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We
have a tradition, I think, among all the parties to try to have sort of a sunshine person who tries to lift the spirits of our members when they are facing a personal loss or challenge. And I happen to live with one of the members who does this beautifully and has done it for years. And the member from Colchester recently had a loss in her family, and I just wanted to make sure that she knows that our hearts are with her. Bless you, Madam Speaker. That our hearts are with her and with her family.
Member, we're keeping you in our thoughts. Are there any further announcements? Seeing none. Member from Poultney, can you please offer us a motion to adjourn until Wednesday, April 2nd at 1 p.m.?
Madam Speaker, I make a motion this body stand in adjournment until Wednesday, April 2nd, 2025 at 1 p.m.
You have heard the motion. Are you ready for the question? If so, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it, and this body stands in adjournment until tomorrow at 1 p.m.